it hit me the other day. That quote that was, I'm sure you'll recall, is something along the lines of, pain is temporary, pride is forever.
That's on every
Yeah.
locker room wall.
Right, exactly.
Everywhere in the United States.
Yeah, that whole thing. I'm here to call bullshit.
Yeah, it should be pain is temporary unless you have really bad insurance, but pride.
Also temporary because you're really not going to remember these moments in 30 years from now.
And realistically, how many times in your life do you go, I was proud of myself at that moment? Good morning, Mr. Yacklin. Uh-oh. How are you, sir? What are you angry about today?
Because you wouldn't tell me what we're talking about today.
I gave you a thing.
You did not.
I sent you a text.
You did not give me questions about what we're supposed to be talking about today.
Oh my gosh. Wait, beforehand or once Sam's on?
What? I'm talking about. Oh, your questions were for Sam?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we were going to do the dad book thing.
Oh shit. I didn't even open it up. Oh, I didn't know that's what you were talking about.
Because you said that's what we were going to do.
You're right. I did. I did.
Well, then I'm not as angry. I thought you were holding out and wouldn't tell me the dad book questions I thought you wrote out the dad book questions you were going to ask.
I totally forgot that we were doing that. My bad.
You suck.
I know. You're right. I did. And I did say I would send you the questions first.
You did. That's why I was confused. And then I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm rolling with it. It is what it is.
Wait, so your sister was here last night and we were talking about how you can't just roll with it.
I can roll with it. It just depends.
You can't.
It depends. I have to mentally, I have to ebb and flow it. Yeah. So I have to be prepared to roll with it. Look, trust me, man. I run into a lot of situations like, well, here's what it is. I'm going to roll with it.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Should I text you first so you get 45 minutes to think about it?
Maybe. We'll see how this response goes.
Do you remember the first celebrity you ever met? Just you rolling with it?
I don't. Yeah. Okay, here's the problem. I'm going back in my brain to try and think of my first initial response was, the first thing that came to my brain was the actors from the Highlander show. And then my brain went like, but are they really celebrities?
Wait. Yeah, they're celebrities. They had a TV show on and it was at a convention that you met them.
Yeah, it was.
Adrian Paul.
Yeah,
Duncan MacLeod.
That's right.
Jim Burns.
Jim Burns. Yeah.
And
Jim Burns.
Who did he play?
Joe Dawson. He was the Watcher. So
the Highlander. I think my son would like that show.
Yeah.
Caden would like that show. I think it's got swords.
Henry Cavill's bringing it back, baby. Did you know that? Henry Cavill, Superman.
But as a movie or a TV show?
Movie.
Yeah, that's what the world needs more of. More Highlanders. Do they have 3 movies? Right? Because they had the first 2, Sean Connery. Didn't they redo with Christopher Lamb? I can't believe this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the Highlander.
You're the one that started derailing, brought up with that.
No, I did not derail this. I knew it's just like how I always try to get Dave Matthews in the conversation. You always try to get the Highlander.
That's not true at all. That's not even remotely true. I do not
really
talk about
not,
it.
But
no, I don't talk about it. Everyone that knows me, that knows I used to love that show, it takes the opportunity to bring it up on a regular basis.
I did. I spoke to Kurt Bertle this week, and he brought that up. He's like, he even had the sword. I was like, I know. You don't have to tell me. He's like, I remember when you guys were sword fighting with carpet rolls. I was like, yeah, I scarred me.
We have pictures. Show a picture. Click.
No.
Yeah. You know what I was thinking of? There's 2 things that I was thinking of because it's random. Well, sorry. Let's wrap your last topic. I think those are the first. I'm sure I probably met like a baseball player or something before that. but that's my first recollection of first famous person. Why do you ask? Do you remember yours?
What I think, and this is loosely using the word celebrity, but when we were caddying, I what was it called? You were in the parking lot and you asked, like, can I take your bags to the
you worked a lot
or whatever?
Yeah,
you worked a lot. That's what it was called. You worked a lot. So when a car would come up, they'd open the back of the trunk and you'd take their clubs, walk it up to the clubhouse. Wayne Fonts. Do you know who that is?
Wayne Fonts. Yeah, he was the coach of the Detroit Lions.
Right. So while he was coach of the Lions, he showed up at good old Bay Point.
The good old Bay Point.
And I asked him to take his things, and I'm like, "Wait, aren't you?" And he's like, "Yes, I am." It's like I should have said like Alan Trammell or something. Aren't you Alan Trammell?
I drive by Bay Point on a regular basis, driving Milo to martial arts class. Just last week when we drove by, I said, "Hey, you know what? You see the golf course right there? You know, I used to work there. I used to caddy."
Why I asked the celebrity question is our guest today. A couple weeks back, you brought up like or a couple episodes back, how many other people's stories are you in? And I think you brought up like that you had like a porterhouse stuck in your gums at the dentist and they pull it out or something. Right? That was your story that almost made me gag. So our guest this week has played a role in certainly your and my life, but I would say millions of other people's lives. And it goes back to what we were trying to attempt to do with Roba, the app company we started, was bring back the old, hey, listen to music while you're looking at something, right? And we just made it interactive, but it was because we loved to just sit and listen to music and look at the liner notes, look at the photography and stuff. So we have Sam Erickson coming on. He's a photographer, director, producer. His photography's, I mean, you without even realizing it, you've seen this guy's work. He shot with Dylan, Beck, John Mayer, Jay-Z, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Santana, and
drum roll,
probably the greatest band to ever walk the face of this earth, the Dave Matthews Band. So the first time I bought the Under the Table and Dreaming album, I just remember sitting there looking at the picture of the band through the whole album, just sitting there, like that's all you could look at, right? Like he didn't have the lyrics in there, and so you just look at the photography, and this is Sam's work that's in there.
And this was on the CD, not the cassette, right? At that time,
this was a CD. Yeah. I mean, obviously they had the cassettes back then, but
right.
I had that kind of money back then to buy CDs.
Oof, CD kind of money.
Yeah. But then when you look at like the Radio City pictures that he did with Dave and Tim, when you look at when I was in college, before These Crowded Streets came out, which you and I argue if that's his best album, but Sam did the documentary for MTV on that. So it was the first time, especially in the Dave Matthews universe that I was in, it was the first time that you actually heard the music before hearing it on the album. So there's bits and pieces. So, we recorded this on VHS and by the way, I recorded this on VHS, but I was in film school at the time, so they had a beta machine. So I took the VHS and laid it off to beta, thinking that like I'm going to preserve this quality. And I just, when I was cleaning out my shed, I found those betas. So So Sam has his work on my beta. But it was such an influential thing because, again, going back to, I don't want to like bring this whole, breakup thing that I was going through back then. This album comes out and it was life-changing for me because the band was already so influential in my life. And then, at this point it was, I mean, every song on there told this story, and the whole CD told the story with the intros and outros. And I remember you and I talking about it afterwards. Stuff. So anyway, Sam.
Well, wait. Just to be clear, that your reference there of that time frame was the Before These Crowded Streets album, that when it came out.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. When it came out.
Yeah.
And so Sam's going to be on in a bit here, but you're wearing your Dave Matthews shirt.
Before These Crowded Streets.
Shirt. That's great. I'm wearing, let me see. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Is there any studio stuff in there?
Well, this is what, yeah, I mean, I think so, right? So, like in the booklet, right? Like
that's Sam's work. You can go to his website and get that print. I may edit this up front just so there's context. When he was telling the Dylan story,
yeah,
it put me back when I met Dave.
I knew, I saw your look on your face, and I knew that's exactly where your brain went.
Dude, and I didn't like that. The problem, we were having technical issues during this. Yes. So let's kind of set it up. So there was some technical issues during this, but it's such a good interview. I'm going to put this up front. It's such a good interview that we just bared with it. So sometimes you'll hear we cut each other off because there's the delay with Sam. Yeah. Sam tells this amazing Bob Dylan story. Yeah. So
yeah, it's a defining moment.
It was his defining moment with Bob Dylan. And I would have, if we didn't have this technical issue, I may have told him my story, but here's my story real quick. So Andy, the cameraman who really helped me get my start, Andy K, he actually just retired, but everyone knows I'm a big Dave Matthews fan, right? So
wait, what's the timing here? Set the stage a little bit.
This is 2001, maybe 2002.
Down in Miami.
No. It's when I Did It came out. Or no, it's stand up. It's a stand up album. What is that? 2000.
I don't know the dates on that. Look it up.
Yeah, it was for the album Stand Up. God, that's got to be 2000, because I thought 2001.
Wait, I thought it was Busted Stuff.
No. Because remember, Busted Stuff got leaked, so they did Stand Up before. So it's got to be 2004 probably, or somewhere in that range, because 2001 was I Did It, the I Did Everyday album. 2001, and then probably 3 years after that, 2004, whatever it was,
early 2000s.
That math. I'm sure we lost a lot of listeners just me doing that math. But anyway,
got that out.
So it's during the Stand Up album. The Dave Matthews Band got the song for the intro of college football that year. So it was a stand-up song. Every college football game would have this intro with the two teams, and it's Dave Matthews. And so they're going to shoot kind of a music video-ish thing going in there, going in the front of the game. So Andy K knows I'm this massive Dave Matthews fan, and he calls me up and he's like, look, I can bring you on as a PA to help with the shoot. We're doing the Dave Matthews Band. The night before, I'm at the concert, which was Friday in West Palm. Saturday, I'm going to go on the shoot. And I was like, Andy, to this day, Andy, I love you. You can do no wrong ever in my book. You're the greatest. And so we get there. This is for CBS football, right? CBS college football. I show up wearing an ABC hat. ABC Sports hat. The director pulls me aside. He's like, dude, what are you doing? So already I'm like, oh my God. So he made me go down and buy a hat. I get a new hat. The director gives this whole speech about do not look them in the eyes. Do not call them by their names, because their names are not what you think they are. And I'm sitting there being like, dude, I'm the biggest fan. I know what their names are, and it's like, you're not allowed in the room with them. Unless you're needed, you're not allowed in the room with them. So I'm like, oh, I'm not even going to get to see them because I'm the lowest person on the set that day. So I'm going to be outside. So it was 2 rooms. There was a ballroom, and Andy, I'm sure will post this. There's a shot of me being the stand-in for Dave Matthews. I guarantee Andy puts this on the comments. Andy, that's your cue. And so it was, you have to have a stand-in when you're lighting. And so they would play the song Stand Up, and I'm singing all the lyrics and stuff. So I'm like really getting into it because I'm playing Dave Matthews. So that's it's the ballroom. That's where they were shooting it. And then there's the makeup room. And so he's like, everyone's got to out of this room. And so they put me in the makeup room. Well, the whole band has to go do makeup. So I'm in this room. They walk in. I lost my mind. So the director's in there. They're shooting. The band's just all kind of hanging out, talking stuff. So I'm going to each one, having a whole conversation. I go to Carter. I'm like, dude, will you sign my ticket? And I'm like, what's your favorite song? Just acting like the worst fan. Like the thing that you like, think about being cool. And then whatever the opposite of that is what I was that day. Keep it in mind, I'm in my early 20s. This band was so influential in my life. And then we go around. The only one that I didn't get at this time, and it's original members. So Leroy was there, Boyd. So Dave goes in. So he's the last one. He goes right in. He gets makeup done, goes right in. I had a what we had, a Palm Pilot back then or whatever, that took photos. So I was trying to snap photos. You look real inconspicuous when you're doing this. So I took photos of him doing makeup stuff, and I never released them or anything like that. But anyway, so he goes in, so he comes out, and the band's just all talking, and I'm just witnessing the whole band talking stuff. I was like, this is so cool. Then he goes and Dave goes and does an interview with Rolling Stone. But he had to go where it was quiet, so he went in the hallway of the hotel. So I go out with my hand and ticket and a pen. He's the last autograph I need to get. So I'm just sitting there waiting, and his security team comes up, and he's like, dude, what are you doing? And I'm like, he's like, this is my favorite band. Like, I'm on the shoot. I know I'm not supposed to do this. I get it. He's like, cool, just be quick about it. I was like, oh my God, that's my defining moment, is this guy who security guard I'll never know his name of. So Dave comes out, and I lost my mind. I'm like, will you sign this? And as he's signing it, he's walking. I don't think it was like 2 weeks ago that it hit me that he didn't know I was part of the filming crew. So he thought I was just following him. Right. So he signs this, and I'm talking to him like, oh, I hear you're in a movie and all this, and like just stupid stuff. And he's looking at me like, dude, what are you doing? And I go in the door with him, and I guarantee he looked back. I don't remember this, but I guarantee he looked back at the security like, what are you doing letting this guy go into the film shoot?
Yeah.
And then I was like, all right, I already felt like an idiot. Like, when you're being an idiot. Yeah. So I already felt like an idiot. So I walked off, and I stayed away from the band. I watched the band till like my eyes were glued on them, and I was within earshot to hear what they were talking about. But anyway, so that's the story. So when you hear Sam talking about his Bob Dylan story, that's I wanted this up front so that you have that in the back of your head listening to this story.
Yeah. Sam Erickson, Ebb and Flow. Here we go.
Hey.
Sam, thank you so much for coming on. I can't tell you what this means to us. This is huge.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you. How's it going, Eric? How's it going, Rick?
It's going good. Good now. It's awesome. It's awesome that you're on. Excited about it.
First off, before we even start this, Eric, show Sam what you showed me in the bottom corner. So this is where we're going to start this whole thing. This was life-changing in my world. I'm going to start, when you were growing up, what bands and what music were you into?
I had an older sister, so a lot of my initial musical tastes, came from her. So she was really into Elton John in the mid 70s, like early-ish Elton John. And I really loved, as a kid, that really captured me, Daniel and, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, that sort of era of Elton John. I loved that as a kid. She liked The Who and the Rolling Stones. So all those sort of things I heard through my sister. And then I started to develop my own tastes. In college, I was a reggae DJ for a little while. I was really into kind of Peter Tosh is somebody that I've really loved my whole life. And I used to be a reggae DJ in college. The Replacements were a band that I loved. The Velvet Underground are a band. These are bands that are really foundational to me.
When you were growing up, were you always into photography?
Yes, I guess I was. I don't know if I really realized that. My mom was kind of the family photographer, and she always had a camera out. And I certainly, as a music fan, I was one of those music fans, kind of like the way you guys were just holding up that Before These Crowded Streets vinyl. I would be looking at the liner notes. I'd be looking at all the photographs. All that information on albums really meant a lot to me. So I certainly was familiar with classic rock and roll imagery. And I think that certainly did kind of influence what I did later on with my photography. But yeah, I wasn't really thinking that photography was going to be a career until I was in my later 20s, and I had the chance to shoot. I was 27 when I first photographed Dave Matthews Band. So that's when I sort of started to think, oh, this could be something I could do with my life.
Wow.
How much influence did, from a kind of conceptual standpoint, because before you got on, we kind of introed you and we talked about how exactly everything you just said. When you're sitting there back in the day, all you had was the photography. Under the Table and Dreaming was mine, where it's your picture of the band in there, and you're just sitting there looking at it for however long the album is. So how much did that background of you sitting there looking at this play into your actual photography, sitting there looking at the liner notes when you were listening? Does that play into your mentality when you're shooting the band?
Absolutely, without question. Trying to picture what this might look like on someone else's album, and what it might look like to some kid sitting at home 10 years from now looking at it. I think I was always pretty aware of that kind of thing. Maybe that's sort of my academic background. I come from my father was a cultural anthropologist, I think, and I studied that as well. And I think that I've always had a kind of understanding of imagery and sort of symbolism and what those things mean to music and other kinds of culture. How different cultural forms merge with images and take on a new power.
When you're shooting, and maybe it's evolved and maybe it's both, do you usually try to go more of like the photojournalistic, like capture a moment type thing, or do you like to set things up more aesthetic and for aesthetic purposes or whatnot?
I'm very much in the former camp. I'm much more of somebody who wants their subject to be doing what they do, and I capture them in the most essential way. That's always been my thing. I'm not a real setter upper of scenarios or anything like that. It's much more of like I said, I get back to that anthropological thing. I think I looked at bands as sort of like, tribes that I hadn't met before. I'm actually writing about this at the moment, and I've got a working title for my photo book, which is called Previously Unseen Tribes. And that, I think, was really the way that I approached bands when I first started shooting them, was, really understanding who they were as people, understanding what made them tick before I ever, I was friendly with Dave Matthews Band for years before I actually photographed them. It was several years of just hanging around with them before I actually took a picture of them, which is why there's some things that I was at in the early days that I don't actually have any photos of. A lot of things that I was at that I don't actually have any photos of, because I wasn't thinking of myself as the photographer at that moment.
Oh, you didn't have your iPhone to just snap some pictures?
Or I did not have, yeah, exactly. Having a photograph, I have more photographs of myself in the last, 3 months than I do in the previous 56 years of. The photo has lost some of its currency in its ubiquity now, in terms of value. You know what I mean? In a way,
for sure.
But sorry, what were you going to say, Rick?
Well, I was going to say, how did you meet the band, and then kind of even going further than that, how do you turn meeting the band into a career in photography?
That again is a very excellent question and very foundational to me. I knew several members of the band, that became Dave Matthews Band well before they were in Dave Matthews Band. Having grown up in Charlottesville, Virginia, I knew Tim Reynolds very well back in my high school days before I ever met Dave Matthews. I knew Boyd Tinsley. We ran in the same kind of crowds and parties and such. And I knew of Carter and Leroy. I'd seen them play a bunch of gigs. So the only one I didn't know was Dave Matthews himself. But in 1991, I started dating his sister Jane, and that was sort of how I met him. Jane and I had been sort of friendly over the previous couple of years, just chit-chatting and writing letters. We wrote a lot of letters to each other. It's another thing that people don't do anymore. So no, Jane and I started going out, and she's like, "Oh, my brother's got this band. He plays every Tuesday at this club in Charlottesville. You should come down one week and see him." And I said, "Okay, great. I'll come down." I was living in Philly at the time, and I drove down to Charlottesville to Tracks and saw one of those Tuesday night shows, about a half-filled, bar in Charlottesville. I guess that was in summer of 1991. Anyway, and I realized I knew lots of guys in the band already, and I just hadn't met her brother yet. But after that, I met them all, and I just started hanging around, through Jane. The band would rehearse in Dave's mom's basement, and there was a lot of ways to hang around. Everybody was sort of in the same place, at that time. So I just hung around with them a lot. And then when they were asked to go up to Bearsville to do Under the Table, I was just like hanging around a lot. And then I kind of started taking pictures. And then they asked me, they said they needed a band photo for the inside of the record, and would I do something, shoot. So that was really the first ever kind of shoot that I ever tried to do, was taking Dave Matthews Band down to the meatpacking district in Manhattan in the September of 1994, and walking around and shooting just those photographs, some of which ended up in the album package. And that was sort of how, but it was, like I said, that was a 3-year process of just like hanging out. And then by the time I shot them, I knew their dynamic really well. I knew who they were. Most people don't have a chance to spend 3 years getting to know a band before they photograph them. So it's not like really that you can replicate per se, but that's what happened in this case.
So when you were during that shoot, because you knew them so well, did it remove any sort of nervousness, or because it was your first shoot with them, do you remember that feeling, that experience at all?
Kind of both, in a way. Like, I wasn't nervous about them because, one, they weren't famous or anything, and they were just guys that I knew well. But I was aware of the fact that I was doing something that I hadn't done before, and I was nervous about, but not too nervous, really. I mean, I think that the bar was pretty low for me that day. It was like, get one picture that we can put in the record, please. Like, it wasn't like they weren't counting on coming out of that shoot with, publicity photos and this and that and the other thing. It was just like, just get a cool image of the band that we can use in the package. So I knew that I knew I could take some chances. And in fact, I used a lot of really weird films that I'd never shot before, several different kinds of infrared films that I had never used before and didn't really know how to expose properly. And some of the photos are terribly exposed, and yet they made really interesting pictures regardless because of the quality of that film. So
I was reading about you somewhere. You said that you play guitar badly but enthusiastically.
Yeah, that's true.
Being a musician, when you were listening to Dave and the band practicing in the basement and then going to tracks, did you know there was something there, that they would be this massive band, or were you just like, yeah, they're good, they're fine?
I think I knew, and I think I remember telling people who were highly skeptical, like, really, this is the thing? I'm like, I don't know why, but this is the thing. And it was, I mean, I loved the music. It wasn't music that I, like, if you heard what I was describing as my foundational music, it wasn't music that was necessarily like, I wasn't like a Phish guy or a Grateful Dead guy, which isn't to say that DMB is actually like those as much as people would like them to be. But the point is, they weren't necessarily up my alley, but I liked it a lot. But I could also just see the connection that happened in the room. I mean, it was much more just about witnessing a show. And I had this experience so many different times, seeing them in a city and then coming back to that same city and seeing them with, exponentially more people. And, every time I saw them play, there was a connection. I mean, again, the thing that people don't remember is this is pre-internet times. You couldn't have seen a video of the band playing. The only thing you could do was hear somebody's bootlegged tape that they made at the show. And people were so into it and would know the music without it being released, without it being, publicized. I knew from the way that band connected with their audience that it was going to be something huge. And I'd like to say, I wish I knew that was prescient. It was just so obvious. I mean, if you'd seen Dave Matthews Band in a small room in 1992 or 1 or whatever, you would have, I assume most people would have seen what I saw, but I kind of knew. Yeah.
Wow. So you go from the Dave Matthews Band, which and you're capturing these, in my mind, and I want to get back to the making of the Under the Table and Dreaming and how the role that you played. But before we do, I kind of want to go, how do you turn being a photographer for a band that you knew, and yes, you're capturing great images and stuff, but how do you make a career out of that? Like, were you introduced to other people? Did the record company say, like, these are so good, go do this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and everybody needs a break in a creative field. Everyone needs some kind of lucky moment and some kind of great opportunity. And obviously this early opportunity with DMB was mine, but then you do need to then take that and as you're making clear here, you need to then figure out how to take that and extrapolate it into something sustainable. And in this case, I knew, obviously from shooting the band, then I knew a lot of people that worked at RCA Records all of a sudden. RCA Records was an important record company of the day, still is, obviously. And they had other artists that they wanted me to shoot. And then people that I knew left RCA Records and went, like my buddy Greg Lynn was the product manager for Dave Matthews Band on Under the Table and Dreaming. And then he ended up shortly thereafter moving over to Columbia Records and then calling me about a young singer-songwriter that nobody had ever heard of called John Mayer. And would I ride around in a van with him and take some pictures of him in his little van and take, at these little coffee house gigs. And so, that was another chapter, which we can get into. But I'm just saying that this is what happens when you work in this field. It's, it's relationship driven. It's the same as TV production or tech work or anything. I mean, all these fields are relationship driven. You have to be good at something, but you also have to have relationships, and you've got to build trust with the people that you work with, so that they want to bring you back and they want to, introduce you to their, very precious, clients who they value.
If I'm hearing you correctly, Dave Matthews becomes huge, John Mayer becomes huge, and the common link is you. Are you the rainmaker of the music industry?
Oh, without question, yeah. It's all down to me.
No question.
No, I mean, I think that, and again, it's funny that we're talking about this. I've been writing a lot about this. I definitely did have some really great opportunities with working with artists that went on to incredible things at a formative age. And I think it turns out that I was a really good person for someone to work with the first time, I was empathic. I was very much trying to help. Like, it was like, here's this person, I really believe in what they're doing and I want to help them, communicate this to the world. I was really passionate about that and thoughtful about that. I mean, I think later on, once you do lots of photo shoots and there stops being this, not everyone can be amazing. Not everyone can be special. It's just like bang, bang, bang. In those early days, those first few times you get shot, how it happens and with whom is all very important to how things turn out, how your image develops, how your relationship with your fans develops. Some of those formative shots, the first time that you're talking about with this album cover, the first time you see a band, and you love the band, that's kind of, or the artist, right. That's kind of the image in your head of who you loved for the music. And so those moments are, I took them always. I was very cognizant of that at the time, and maybe that was a good thing for some of those artists starting out. But otherwise, they were famous because they're amazing and nothing to do with. I mean, you could take a picture of their toes and put them out, and they would be great because they're that great. But I mean, so I don't want to overstate the importance of photos, but certainly, I was very honored to have some of those opportunities.
You're kind of downplaying, but there is, especially back when Dave and John became who they were, like that's really what you had were the photos. And so you're creating the story based around your photos. And case in point, let's go back to the Before These Crowded Streets making. And I want to talk about how you actually did the documentary, but that was the first time that fans got to hear Dave Matthews music before it was released, at least on a national scale. Yes, there were people who were, giving bootlegs and stuff, but it came out the week before the album. And so it was our first time seeing that Alanis Morissette was going to be on there. You had this image, and of Alanis and Dave that it's etched into my head. So when I heard about you, and I don't know if you want to get into how I heard about you, but when I heard about you, I was like, did he shoot the Alanis and Dave? And she's like, yes. And I was like naming photographs of yours. And that's how much of an impact that the photography played on music lovers.
Yeah.
So it's a long way of saying, you meant a lot in my life without even realizing it. But the second thing that I want to talk, and Eric's, I know, because that's what we used to do. But I want to talk about the making it before these crowded streets, because for the fans, that was probably the seminal moment where you got your first look into making an album, but their personalities. And as someone who does TV, that is so important for the selling of the album. So can you talk about that whole process?
Absolutely. I mean, I had been doing a lot of photography from that first time of shooting DMB in '94. Then fall of '97 came along, and the band was going out to Sausalito to start recording Before These Crowded Streets. So they didn't know that's what it was called at the time. And they asked me to go out there and take some photos. So I was just there with a still camera, and I was taking photographs, and some of those photos you've probably seen before. That's a beautiful studio, The Plant.
Oh, yeah.
And we were all living on little houseboats in Sausalito Bay. It was just a really cool time. But the guy, another friend of mine from RCA, a guy called Hugh Surratt, he called me up on the phone because I think in this case the band had asked me to go out, not the label. And so when the label found out that I was out there, my buddy Hugh Surratt called me, and he goes, you know what an EPK is? And I said, no, what's that? And he goes, well, it stands for Electronic Press Kit. It's kind of a long, weird name of saying it's just a little documentary about a band when they're making a record, and help the press and help the fans understand what's coming in the record. And I said, oh yeah, that sounds cool. He goes, well, if I shipped you a video camera, would you shoot some video while you're doing the photos? And I said, sure. And so they FedExed me some kind of Sony or Panasonic little handheld video camera, and I started shooting some video of them, some of which ended up in that documentary. But anyway, so I was taking photos and video, and when I got back to New York, I hired an editor to help me put some of the video together into a little demo for them. And they were like, this is really cool. And you know what? We have another opportunity for this material. MTV will put out a half an hour of prime time, will give us a half hour of prime time if we can give them a half hour long documentary. And I said, sure, let's do it. Now we're talking about something that I really have not done before. And I'm like, how am I going to make a half hour documentary? And I did something that I think is great advice to anybody. I called somebody that I knew was really good at the thing that I wanted to do. And in this case, it was D.A. Pennebaker, who had made Don't Look Back, the Bob Dylan film, arguably the most famous music documentary of all time. I cold called his office. I was like, oh, help, I need to make a documentary. And, what can you tell me about that? I didn't say help.
Wow.
I mean, I did call and said, look, I've got this assignment. What can, would you talk to me? Would you meet with me? They're like, oh, come on up and meet with us. And they hooked me up with a cinematographer who was really great. And D.A. Pennebaker's son, Jojo Pennebaker, ended up becoming my business partner in a soon-to-be developed production company that sprung out of this. But anyway, at the time, I was just reaching out, trying to figure out what to do. We ended up shooting it on 16 millimeter film. Part of the reason why that Before These Crowded Streets documentary kind of looks as timeless and amazing as it does is that it was shot by like the Pennebaker team on 16 millimeter film stock, with photos. It's funny, before now, now you scan photos and you can break them into layers, and this was how we did the photos in this thing. We took all those photos that I had taken and I printed them and I pinned them up on the wall, and we filmed them with the film camera, on the walls. Wow. It's like physically shooting onto film.
Old school.
Yeah, very old school. I mean, that's as old school as it gets, right there. So that came out, and all of a sudden it was like, man, that like I've got a primetime half-hour documentary that, you know, did really well, and then it's like a whole nother. I kind of wasn't a photographer anymore after that, or primarily a photographer anymore after that. I mean, I still took some photo gigs, but I was much more of a filmmaker after that.
I actually, knowing we were going to have you on, I went back to go rewatch this, and it was bringing up all of these, this imagery and this emotion and this nostalgia, and thinking about just taking me back to riding in my car at that time, listening to that music over and over and over again. You just, you know, but the visuals and the imagery that I'm watching was the first time I remember seeing any sort of video associated with these songs that are so ingrained in my brain that, you know, was captured in those moments in the studio of singing these pieces. And and he looks super young, of course, you know, because he was comparatively to now, whatever. I'm looking at, I was just like, wow, like what an amazing like just I mean documentary, but just capturing of these moments of the of something that's so ingrained in me at this point. I loved it. I love every minute of it.
That's great.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It is.
To do some of the photos, and we're going to keep putting up your site and Instagram so people can play along and go and look at your photos there. But there is, you said it earlier, and there's a massive thing, and I want to figure out, how do you get this out of someone, is trust. Like these artists have their brand, they have their style. For someone like you to come in and, let's just say Dylan or the Red Hot Chili Peppers, there's got to be a certain level of trust, right? So how do you get that from an artist?
Wow. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, obviously once you work with a few artists that other artists like, then they know there's kind of an understanding. Well, if so-and-so like this person, then I'm probably going to like them. I mean, there's a little of that, you know? But I mean, what is trust? Trust is two people that, I mean, you can almost tell the moment you meet somebody, whether it's in the grocery store or whether it's, you know, wherever the hell it is, there's a vibe, chemistry, chemicals, like, you know, there's a weird chemical thing between two people when they chat, even if there's nothing significant about the chat. You know, you get a vibe off of somebody. What is trust? You know, trust is making somebody feel like you can deliver the thing that they need you to deliver. You know what I mean? And that you can do so in a way that is, you know, in line with their beliefs and values, and do so in a way that is in line with just the whole vibe of what they want to be or how they want to present themselves. So trust in the photography thing is about aesthetics and belief in the way that you see the world. You know, everyone sees the world in a particular way. Even if you're not a professional photographer, everybody sees the world in a very unique way. You know, you could give a camera to somebody, the same camera, the same lens, and the same subject matter, and 100 people could shoot it, and everybody would do it a little bit differently, no matter what, you know? And so, you know, trust is knowing that the person is going to deliver something that you believe in, or that you know, aesthetically that you can relate to. And then also just that interpersonal aspect of trust, that you know that this person is, you know, doing it for the reasons that are, you know, you don't want a paparazzi taking your photo for you know, for an album, you know what I mean? Like, there's different kinds of photographies with different purposes, and the kind of photography I did involved a lot of close up, intimate contact. So that requires a lot of trust, and trust is the same in every game, and trust is the same, you know, it's who you are inside and how you communicate that, and the dynamics that establish yourself between the two people.
Are there photos that when you look at them, you remember what was going on at that time, or having to wait to capture a particular, you know, moment or something that, you know, the backstory that gives it even more meaning to you?
Oh man, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, most of my favorite photographs that I've taken are, I could tell you the story of where I was, what was happening before and after, you know, for sure. That's, to me, the magic of it. I don't think you can, the way that I look at photography, moments happen, and you're so lucky to be the one that's there when those moments happen. You know, I'm not, like I said, there are some photographers like David LaChapelle who, are very, they'll be like, I'm going to photograph so-and-so in this scenario. And they create this entire, and that's wonderful. It's their brain, it's their creativity, and the artist fits into that. That's not the kind of photographer I am. I'm a photographer who, the moment happens and I'm there kind of to capture it. And so it does require the artist. It requires more of the artist in a way, because they are not they are the subject, but they are also generating the energy that's captured,
My hope is the answer is yes. Do you have just photos all over your house?
Yes.
Thank God.
Not my own.
Oh, no.
I'm not hanging my music photos. I have a lot of landscapey photos of mine hanging in the house.
Okay.
Here. I'm upstate right now. Here's a photo. I took that photo of a tractor back in the 1990s sometime.
Oh, wow.
But I don't have a lot of my music work hanging in my house in the city either. I should.
First of all, where I love these kind of things is because Eric and I both have kids, and I know you have kids. Do your kids love what you do? Are they like, holy cow, the life that you've lived through your photography? Are they as happy as I am to talk to you?
They are somewhere in between. Obviously they're now at an age where they're starting to understand music. Mostly they're appreciative of the fact that I can get them good concert tickets. But they're impressed. I mean, one of my daughters especially really has a more of a retro sensibility, so she's super impressed with, the Bob Dylan story, which we haven't even touched on yet, which I thought was going to be my defining moment for you guys.
Perfect.
She's super into Bob Dylan, and so she can't believe that I got to sit in a room with Bob Dylan, by myself and chat and take photos of him. They are, like, for instance, Dave Matthews for them is just like a silly uncle, like a lot of other silly uncles that they know, like it's even now. They've recently gone to shows and now they get it. But for most of their lives, they knew Dave Matthews as just like another guy that was a silly uncle that would, do funny things when they came over.
Follow-up question. Will you adopt me? So Sam, we're dying now. Tell us the defining moment. You set it up so beautifully.
Yeah.
Well, what I was thinking of was, and it's, again, this Bob Dylan story is not so much that in the end of the day in my photo career, it was but a minor event in terms of the actual commercial aspects of what I did, but in terms of my own head and the lessons I learned from it and the things I took away from it, it was a defining moment for me. I've told the story a few times, but we were on tour in Europe in 1996. I was asked by Dave Matthews Band to sort of go on tour with them for a couple of weeks in Europe, and they were traveling. It was a 2 or 3 week long tour in June and July of 1996, and part of the tour was opening for Bob Dylan for a few nights. So the first night that we got there, we had a guy from Dylan's team be like, this is the way it's going to go down. Bob doesn't really like to talk to anybody. Don't make eye contact with Bob. Don't try to talk to him. Blah, blah, blah. Now, if you ask, and it's amazing to me that you asked me earlier about foundational music and I didn't say Bob Dylan, but no, Bob Dylan is, for you, Dave Matthews, he's like, Bob Dylan is like that for me. Like, I mean, it is just like, I was astounded that I would be in the same room with Bob Dylan. I couldn't fucking believe it. Okay. So, and I loved Blood on the Tracks. That was really the record that I was jamming out to at the time. And he played Simple Twist of Fate that first night we saw him, and I lost my friggin' mind. Anyway, they were like, don't talk to Bob, So I was not planning on meeting Bob. And then before the first show, Bob comes into the dressing room with his road manager. And he's like, hey, Dave, you going to play Eat Too Much, Drink Too Much? Yeah, I like that song. Yeah, that's a good one. And I said, "Oh, hey, I completely forgot the don't talk to Bob part and don't say anything or don't make eye contact." I was like, "Hey, oh, Bob, can I take your shot? Take a photo with you guys together?" And I only had this little point and shoot Yashica camera on me. And so Dave and Stefan stood next to him, and I snapped literally a single frame, one frame. I mean, imagine if he had blinked, like I took one picture.
Right.
And it's hilarious to look at this contact sheet. There's a gazillion other things on it. And then there's Bob Dylan, Dave Matthews, and Stefan Lassard in one little frame in the corner. Anyway, that one little frame ran in Rolling Stone like the next week. And remember their random notes or whatever they would have, like
yes.
Yeah, they had like, just shit that was happening on the road in music at the time, So this picture of Dave and Stefan, they cropped Stefan out. Fonzie I'm sure, was bummed about that, but it ended up just being a shot of they'd cropped Fonz out of one side of it. I didn't tell them to do that. The fact that I did that the fact that I spoke up and said, "Oh, can I go?" The next day, Dylan's tour manager comes up and goes, "Bob wants you to come to his dressing room and take some pictures." And I'm like,
"Oh my God.
Bob wants me to come to," like it wasn't even processing to me that this was what was being said.
Right.
Now, and then this is where it's like a good and a bad thing for me. I went into this room completely unprepared. I learned a lesson about being prepared, in a hard way here. Although there was very little I could have actually done about it. I mean, in retrospect, I went into his dressing room. Nobody really introduced me to him. I was just kind of dumped in Bob Dylan's dressing room. Bob Dylan is a particularly, he's not a natural hang, you know what I mean? Like he's a person that's really used to having that reaction on people. And he doesn't, conversely, since nobody else can walk in the room and be cool with Bob Dylan, he can't really be cool with anybody else either. And I was trying my best. I'm not going to be that guy. I didn't say I'm a fan. I didn't say any of this. I was just like, all right, let's take some photos. But it was so dark. He was sitting in a room that was nearly pitch black. There was like one little light in the corner. And I had no flash. I had no lighting. This is what I was saying. Like I came to a thing and I was not actually prepared. Like in this day and age, I have a digital camera that would have made that look amazing, because that's one thing that digital cameras can do better than film cameras, is that they can shoot in low light. You can crank that ASA up. You can whatever. I wouldn't have had any trouble if I had my Sony A9 with me at that point. But at that point, I had this ginormous film box camera that you had to look down through the top and you had to focus with a wheel and it was like a bear of a camera and needs a lot of light. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking through the thing and I see Bob Dylan looking kind of grouchy at me. I'm like, fuck, I'm looking through this camera and just looking at Bob Dylan being really grouchy that I don't have my shit together. You know what I mean? And I'm like, this is my worst fucking nightmare, So I'm like, hey, Bob, can we go outside? It would be so much nicer if we could go out. No, I got to stay right here. Bob, can we go the hallway where there's some more? No, I'm going to sit right here. Like he just sat in this fucking chair. He was not going to do it except in this chair in this dark room. So I was like, oh my God, like my dream opportunity is here and I literally cannot do it. So I'm sitting there, I'm looking through him being grumpy at me. And I'm like, okay, Bob, turn your head to one side and then put your eyes back to me. So like turn your head and then look back. And I did, and I snapped it at a quarter of a second. I mean, I don't know if you can imagine hand-holding a big box camera and trying to shoot it with the lens open for a quarter of a second and hoping that it'll stay in focus. That's what I was doing. And I left that room like so upset. Like I was so frustrated. I don't even know what I could have done differently because it wasn't like I knew I was going to have a portrait session with Bob Dylan and I should have had lighting on me. But still, the lesson I took away was just always have lighting, always have a flash on you, always have some kind of, But anyway, the point of the story was I got one really cool picture out of that. It turns out that time when I had him look the one way and look back at me, ended up being the cover of a book about 35 years later. A photographer was writing a book about Time Out of Mind. And it turned out that when I took that picture of Bob Dylan was about a week or two after he had finished the tracking, the primary tracking on Time Out of Mind. And what's significant about that is that this was a period of time when, in 1996, Dylan hadn't come out with original material in years. No original new music, and and it turns out he was recording what would become like the comeback record of all time, and one of his great records, And so this photographer was like, I have never seen a portrait of Bob that more indicates who he was at this period of time than this picture you took in 1996, which was right after they finished recording. He's like, can I use it as the cover of my book? Wow. And I was like, yeah. And then so I was like, wow, how fascinating that the thing that I thought was such a disaster yielded an image that this guy is the most studied guy about Bob Dylan you've ever met. Like, I mean, this guy, his name is Graley Heron. He is a professor of Bob Dylan at Xavier University. You can look him up. You can be a professor of Bob Dylan because he's just that profound and intense. But this guy was like, This picture represents Bob Dylan to me at this period of time better than anything I could imagine. And I have to have this as my cover. And I was like, wow, that's really that was the full circle moment for me.
Don't you feel, especially you obviously feel this way if it's your defining moment, that had you been prepared, had you lit it exactly the way you want, even if you would have went outside, it wouldn't have been as memorable of a photo, or as, I'm going to say, iconic of a photo. I mean, it's on the cover of a book. So isn't there something to be said about if you were too prepared, it would have just been a photo?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, you're right. Had I been better prepared, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It wouldn't be the defining moment. It's kind of a defining moment in the negative, in a way, although now there's this other cool, full circle, happy ending to it. But, had I been more prepared, it would have been a more standard photograph. You're right. But at the same time, nah, it would have been better to have a flash. I'm not that much of a dreamer to think it's a good thing I didn't have I made lemonade out of lemons.
It does speak to exactly I kind of what you're touching on there, which is, but you also never know, right? So don't give up. Don't I can't do this, right? You were still willing to set it up, try and capture something, and now look, you 35 years later, like you said, it being praised as an iconic capturing of that time frame. That's incredible.
Exactly. There's an aspect of being resourceful, and that's a defining moment. And then there's an aspect of probably just some simple preparatory steps that one could take that would have made it yet more successful. I probably would have taken more film. But the funny thing about Bob Dylan as well, though, is that if you look at a lot of his album covers, I think what he was doing was trying to get an album cover out of that. If you look at a lot of his album covers from all of his album covers. I mean, maybe not the early 60s ones, but he always had just some super rando photograph of himself. Think of the Street Legal cover, or think of
right.
Even the Blood on the Tracks cover, or even there's so many. Even the Time Out of Mind cover turned out to be a really super rando snap of him from the studio, but. I think that's what he was doing, actually. I think he would just I went back and looked at it later. I was trying to think why did Bob Dylan ask me to do that? Wasn't horning in on, they came up to me and said, Bob wants you to come to his room. The only encounter he had with me was me saying, can I take a picture of you guys together really quick? But I guess that was his MO, was he would go around and he would just sort of meet photographers and see if anything came of it, So on one level, had I been more prepared, probably more would have come of that. But it's not what happened. It's not the story. You can't rewrite history either.
I want to end on this. What's next for you? You mentioned you're writing. I know you have just tons and tons of photos that the world wants to see.
Thank you for asking. Yes, I am working on a book that is tentatively called "Previously Unseen Tribes," and it's sort of it's a photo book, but it's also a memoir kind of. It covers some of the stuff we talked about here. It's storytelling and photos mixed together, and a little bit about my background and my father, when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time in the Andes with my father. He would go off, and he was an ethnomusicologist, and he learned to speak Quechua, which is like the native language of the Upper Andes. And we went there in the 70s. If you can imagine the early mid 70s at 15,000 feet in the Andes, I spent part of my childhood there. And I think that really did contribute to how I looked at, studying artists before shooting them and that kind of stuff. Anyway, I write about that. I write about my dad and that. Mm-hmm. And then sort of, I'm going to do an interview with Dave Matthews and sort of ask him how it feels to be the subject of those photos, and maybe a little bit about what his perspective is on the other side of the lens. And to talk to John Mayer, to talk to Jim James from My Morning Jacket about some of their, I like to unpack the photographer subject relationship a bit more from their side, I'd like to, what does trust mean to them? Yeah. Did they trust me the way that I thought that they, were they happy or unhappy with this or that or the other thing? Those kinds of, I'm going to try to have those kind of conversations, certainly with Dave Matthews, but hopefully with some of the other folks as well.
And are you going to do like a coffee table book?
Yeah, but it'll be a lot of writing, more writing than the average photo book, but not like a memoir that just happens to have a few pictures in it either. Like it's definitely more of a photo book.
Got it. Okay.
And hopefully that will be. I'm pretty much just doing that on my own at the moment, but I want to get into a shape where it really feels good to me, and then try to bring it to a publisher. I am working on a documentary. I'm developing a documentary about the life of Peter Tosh, who I was telling you earlier is I'm pretty obsessed with his story. I would just be an executive producer on that, but I'm working with other filmmakers on that. I would like to tell, at some point in time, a broader story on film about Dave Matthews Band. I don't know how and when that's going to happen, but I'm hopeful and that at some point that will occur. I think, with this Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, I think the time is kind of now to tell, in my thinking, culturally, it's hard to find a band that actually has had a broader impact on the American live music and cultural scene over the last 30 years. I mean, I was talking to their management about this the other day. No other band has toured at that scale every single year for 30 years. It's never been done. I mean, you can look it up. There is no other, there's just no, other band you can look at. I mean, obviously Phish has toured plenty, but they 10 years off, or, like lots of bands tour, but nobody goes every year to the same cities, to the same places, and creates this every year hang that you gotta be at. And I just think that in terms of what it means, like the American summer and Dave Matthews Band are just two things that are so unbelievably intertwined. Like, I think that is such an important story to tell right now. And there's so many people that would want to be involved in a story like that, from politicians to famous actors to folks like yourselves to just, and the fans that have gone every year. And now they bring their kids and they bring their grandkids. And it's like, it's not about being an oldies act. There's not there's young kids there too. It's not about, they're still making new music.
That's right.
Still making great new music. It's not about that. It's about, they have created something that is integral to the American summer.
Eric and I are proof of that. And you could track our careers and the success of our careers. We started in the lawn. Every year we'd go to a concert. Still to this day, I'll fly up to Michigan and we go. Then we were under the pavilion. It's like, oh my God, there's no sun here. It's not beating down on you. And then we're in the middle, and then we had front row. So you're exactly right. It is integral in so many people's lives.
Yeah, no, you're right. So many people could tell that story, and I hope to be the one to help them tell that story using the archival material that I have and shooting some new stuff. And I mean, if you're going to be in a rock band and you get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I mean, that's like, then, that's kind of a moment, like it's the moment to tell people what you're all about, I think. So I'm hoping to convince them to do that at some point, and we'll see if that happens.
And I'm publicly saying this now, so this is going to be out there in the public. If you need a producer, editor, director, I'll do it for free. I'm just throwing that out there, Sam. You do with that information what you will. Sam, thank you so much for doing this. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for sharing.
Hey, it was really fun. Thank you. Really, thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Whew.
Chills. Oh my God, those stories. As he's talking, all I keep thinking is like, we have our social clips. Like this one's going viral. This one's going to go viral.
Yeah, it was very cool. And like you said, so many things that are ingrained, within us, and photos and pictures that are out there that so many people have seen, and that are not attached to him for them, right? I had no idea, right? Seeing all the stuff that you're talking about, it wasn't important to me back then to go look and go, oh, who's the photographer on this, type thing. Right. It's just the imagery that's ingrained and embedded in your brain.
You mentioned seeing the MTV documentary on Before These Crowded Streets. Yeah. Think about that when you, like, back in the day, seeing it live for the first time. It came on at 8:00. I told everyone to get out of my dorms. I'm like, I need to watch this solo. I hit record, make sure it's recording. You fear that, like, you rewind it afterwards to make sure you got it. And I wore that tape out. I must have wore that tape out. But putting yourself back in 98 when that came out, like, hearing Spoon, right? They start off with Spoon, but you didn't know it was Spoon at the time.
Yeah.
Oh, such life-changing stuff.
Yeah.
Music is.
Interestingly, I hated their single that they released.
Don't
the
Drink
first
the Water?
single. Yeah.
Don't Drink the Water. It's one. I know. I thought the same thing because it was a real big departure.
It was
from the music, but it was also it was like this is, and like Sam says it, like they would put out the obvious one. There's nothing obvious about that being a single.
I agree.
Like Rapunzel or something like that. You kind of get that. It's within the Dave catalog, right? But Don't Drink the Water is like, holy cow.
Yeah. I was really adverse to it originally when it first came out. I was like, what? Like, what is this? Like, I know, but it didn't resonate.
It's in my top songs now. Like,
it's a great song.
Such a great song.
It's a great song. I have that problem holistically with bands across, like when you have a set thing like Mumford, and you get a vibe, and then you see the next single, it might not match up with that, so it doesn't match. Right. And it doesn't sit well. That song just didn't sit well, but it's an incredible song.
All right, we're hitting 2 hours. I got to go set up for I'm doing poker night at my house tonight.
Oh wait, are we done?